I thought I was just comforting my son until a silence between us changed everything. What unfolded that night was never part of any mother's plan. Never did I envision revealing this, yet life has a peculiar talent for ushering us into the unforeseen. Anna is my name, and I find myself at the age of 47. For quite some time now, I have embraced the journey of being a single mother. As I navigate the journey of raising my son, Owen, I reflect on the years that have shaped him into the renegade 20-year-old he is today. Our bond has always been strong, only the two of us lending a hand, supporting one another through the highs and lows of existence. On a fateful night, an unforeseen event unfolded. Owen appeared utterly fatigued and mentioned that he wasn't feeling his best. He had toiled diligently and immersed himself in his studies, and as he gazed outward, something unexpected occurred. Conveyed him. He could recline on my bed if he sought solace, it was a restless night in our home. It requires some time to reach a comfortable warmth. I draped a thick blanket over him. Initially, everything appeared to be ordinary, a mother lending her hand to her son. However, then, as I reclined beside him, he edged nearer, a subtle shift in the space between us. He must have been seeking warmth, and I didn't dwell on it much. Yet, in that moment, he rested his head gently against my shoulder, as he used to when seeking comfort as a child. Though taken aback, I chose to let it go. He likely sought solace. The warmth radiated from him, a comforting presence beside me, his steady breathing creating a soothing rhythm as we lay there together. I sensed Owen's breathing gradually ease, as if he were drifting into slumber. The silence enveloped the room, allowing the rhythmic thump of my heartbeat to resonate in the stillness. It was an odd sensation, yet it brought a sense of tranquility. I remained still. Wishing to avoid any disruption, I reassured myself that it was merely a mother offering solace to her child. Yet, as time passed, he shifted once more, inching even nearer to me beneath the blanket. His arm encircled me more firmly, and I found myself momentarily paralyzed, caught in uncertainty. A part of me yearned to articulate something, to create distance. However, another part of me remained motionless. A palpable tension hung in the air, an inexplicable weight that I found impossible to dismiss, leaving me to ponder the reasons behind this unsettling feeling. An unexpected event unfolded that caught me off guard. A sensation washed over me, firm beneath the coverlet. It came as a surprise, and I could feel my heart begin to race. I endeavored to maintain my composure, reminding myself that he was merely my son. Perhaps he was unaware of it altogether. Himself. I reclined, attempting to dismiss the emotions that began to swell within me. I reassured myself that it was merely a fleeting instance, an odd and uncomfortable pause that would soon fade away. Yet, as the minutes slipped away, a dawning awareness settled in. Everything had changed, and I found myself at a loss for how to navigate this new reality. Owen remained near, his breath calm and even, yet the warmth that enveloped us was palpable. As I grew, a desire to utter something light-hearted flickered within me, yet the words eluded my grasp. In that moment, I found myself ensnared, grappling with the uncertainty of my own emotions. Then Owen shifted slightly, lifting his head to look at me. His eyes held a softness I had not seen before. His look enveloped me in a cocoon of safety while simultaneously igniting a flicker of nervousness within. Though he uttered no words, his gaze seemed to silently inquire if all was well. I attempted to smile, wishing it might alleviate the peculiar sensation. Yet it only intensified the silence that enveloped everything. Owen's hand lingered on my arm, warm and soft, a steady presence. His fingertips brushed lightly, almost in a trance, as if lost in thought. It was a seemingly insignificant gesture, yet each touch stirred a deep emotional unease in me that I struggled to understand. I maintained a calm breath, striving to conceal the rapid thumping of my heart from him. Uncertain of my next move or words, I remained still, enveloped in the peculiar bond that held me captive. In the quiet moments, I reassured myself that this was merely a mother offering solace to her son, nothing beyond that. Yet, in that stillness, with only the two of us nestled beneath the blanket, my thoughts whirled incessantly, intrusive notions that felt so out of place, yet I found myself unable to cast them aside. He was my child. Yet, as I lay there beside him, the proximity stirred something profound within me, an intimacy I couldn't quite grasp. A blend of confusion and warmth enveloped me, an unforeseen sensation that rendered me motionless. Owen appeared oblivious to the turmoil I was experiencing. He lingered by my side, his hand gliding gently, a soothing presence as if it were the most instinctive act imaginable. His breathing was serene. His eyes fluttered shut once more, and I found myself questioning whether he was drifting off to sleep. Yet, his hand stirred, shifting with a deliberate slowness. Along my arm, a chill coursed through me as he opened his eyes, locking his gaze onto mine. In that moment, a question lingered within his stare, as if seeking an answer only I could provide. He inquired whether this was acceptable, whether I was also caught in the same emotional confusion that he couldn't explain. I murmured his name, struggling to let the sound escape my lips. I wished to put an end to this as well. He leaned in closer, then pulled away, establishing a measure of distance. Yet, in that moment, I found myself frozen, the palpable tension enveloping us like a thick fog. A subtle tempest gathering in the stillness. Silence enveloped us, yet the atmosphere thrummed with the weight of unexpressed thoughts. Unspoken emotions lingered between us, a silent understanding that hung in the air as he leaned in closer, as if drawn by an invisible force. My heart raced, and my thoughts surged like a wild river. Yet I found myself unable to retreat. I found myself in a state of conflict, caught between my responsibilities as his mother and the unsettling emotions that had emerged. As he leaned in, my breath hitched, and all my thoughts dissolved, leaving only that singular moment suspended in time. Between us, Owen's hand lay softly on my shoulder, his fingers now lingering with a delicate touch, as though he too were caught in a moment of uncertainty. The world beyond seemed far away, and my attention was solely captured by the comforting warmth of his presence. The rhythmic thump of his heart resonated in the silence, a sound I could nearly perceive. For a fleeting moment, I shut my eyes, seeking solace within. I urged myself to retreat, to distance myself from the intimacy that enveloped me, leaving me in a state of bewilderment and intensity. Yet, in that moment, his hand moved gently, brushing past me in a familiar, comforting gesture that reminded me of our earlier days. I opened my eyes, and there he was, gazing at me with a softness that spoke of trust. His face was so near that I could discern every minute detail, the delicate freckles, the gentle curve of his mouth, and the way his eyes sought mine. In his gaze, I found a vulnerability that mirrored my own, revealing that he too was ensnared in this moment, as lost as I was. We sat together in an unfamiliar silence, unsure how to move forward after everything that had happened. My mind swirled with questions, doubts, and uncertainties that eluded comprehension, yet my body remained frozen, unwilling to break the spell of silence. I felt a wall between us, an emotional tension I couldn't explain, as though years of unspoken emotion had formed a rift. Shattering the spell, he averted his gaze, a hint of embarrassment creeping in, and released a nervous chuckle while rubbing the nape of his neck. For a fleeting moment, it anchored me in reality, awakening the awareness of our closeness, the depth of our shared experiences, and then, like a sudden tide, the weight of it all crashed down upon me. I inhaled deeply, attempting to anchor myself amidst the tumult of feelings that appeared to swell from every facet of my existence. I fervently wished that he remained oblivious to the storm of emotions swirling within me. "Apologies, Mother," he murmured, his tone gentle and wavering, a hint of doubt threading through his speech. "I hadn't intended to create an awkward atmosphere," He averted his eyes, and for a fleeting moment, I noticed the slightest flush tinting his cheeks, a hint that maybe he was wrestling with the same tumult of emotions that I was trying to keep in check. I found myself paralyzed, yearning to offer him solace, to assure him that all was well, that this discomfort altered nothing in our connection, yet the words eluded me. I stood there, paralyzed, grappling with the weight of the stillness that enveloped us. In that fleeting instant, a sudden clarity washed over me, revealing an unsettling truth. I had never felt more like an outsider. As I approached my son, I instinctively placed my hand softly on his shoulder, wishing that this simple gesture might provide him with a sense of comfort. A subtle smile danced at the edges of my mouth as I endeavored to alleviate the tension, yet I sensed my own anxiety weaving its way into my speech. "It's okay, Owen." I spoke in a gentle, unwavering tone, hoping to offer him some comfort. "It's simply that, for such an extended period, it has been just the two of us, hasn't it? We have acclimated to it, and now it seems somewhat peculiar." He nodded in understanding, and I caught a flicker of relief in his eyes, as if the words had resonated deeply within him. Just as the atmosphere appeared to lift, the doorbell rang, shattering the moment, the delicate stillness. We had just begun to build, when the sharp sound of the bell jolted us both out of the moment, a stark reminder of the world beyond that door I stood before. My heart raced as I rose swiftly, an unexpected gratitude blooming within me for the interruption. As I approached the door, I felt my pulse quicken, unable to dispel the peculiar energy that lingered from our conversation. As I swung the door open, there stood our neighbor Nick, waiting on the other side. He wore a smile that felt like home, radiating an immediate warmth. Yet, I sensed his gaze resting on me a fraction longer than normal, as if he were probing for something deeper. Underneath it all, I swiftly composed myself, wishing the residual tension from the previous encounter would remain unnoticed by him. "Greetings, Anna and Nick." "Hello, Anna." His voice greeted warmly, friendly, and easygoing as always. "I decided to stop by and see if there's anything you might require. As the chill of the season settles in, I am here to assist with any heating concerns you may be facing." His thoughtfulness brought a welcome relief, and I was unexpectedly engulfed by a wave of gratitude. For a brief instant, I permitted myself to unwind, letting the warmth of Nick's presence wash over me and ease the lingering traces of Eunice. "Oh, thank you, Nick," I said, offering him a smile that felt more sincere. "Indeed, the house does have a tendency to grow a bit chilly. Especially during the night, your assistance would be greatly valued, Nick." As I entered, I followed his footsteps, firm and comforting, and I sensed Owen's gaze upon us, instantly catching it from the edge of my sight. I could see his face, his expression elusive, yet there was something in the way he observed us that made my stomach churn for a fleeting moment. The instant I thought I detected a flicker of jealousy in his gaze, he swiftly concealed his emotions, reverting to his familiar air of indifference. The look took me by surprise, instilling an unsettling feeling that Owen might be grappling with emotions more intricate than I had understood. Meanwhile, Nick navigated the living room, inspecting the heater while engaging in casual conversation, inquiring about how things were at home and how I was coping with everything. His voice carried a lightness, and his presence enveloped me in an unexpected comfort. Yet, despite this, my gaze continually returned to Owen, who stood silently in the hallway, observing us with a quiet intensity that charged the air between us with an unspoken tension. The atmosphere in the room had quietly transformed, leaving me caught in a delicate balance between the desire to make Nick feel at home and the need to alleviate the palpable unease that lingered in the air. Since the construction of Owen, it felt as if the two of them were subtly vying for my attention, leaving me uncertain about how to traverse the fragile territory that lay between them. I cast another look at Owen, and for a brief moment, I perceived a flicker in his eyes, a glimmer that stirred my curiosity about his inner turmoil. With emotions he had kept hidden, just as I began to grasp their weight, Nick turned to me, his face lighting up with a light, reassuring smile. "Very well. All things. Looks good here, Anna," he said, his voice imbued with warmth. Feel free to reach out if you require any further assistance. Owen. I expressed my gratitude, and as he exited, the tension between Owen and me seemed to swell, saturating the atmosphere with an intricate complexity that made everything feel more entangled. I softly shut the door behind me and turned, only to discover Owen standing motionless in the hallway. With his arms crossed tightly over his chest and a serious expression etched on his face, his gaze remained unyielding. There was an unmistakable tension in his posture, signaling that whatever was unfolding between us was far from resolved. "Are you okay, Owen?" I inquired with a gentle tone, my thoughts wandering as I sought to understand the chasm that had unexpectedly arisen between us. I found myself yearning to understand the thoughts swirling in his mind, to unravel the mystery of why the distance between us appeared to expand with every fleeting second. He offered a slight, nearly indifferent shrug, his voice barely rising above a whisper as he responded. "Indeed, I am well. I was taken aback by Nick's unexpected arrival. That is all." His words lingered in the atmosphere, yet they failed to illuminate the complexities brewing beneath the surface. I felt compelled to inquire further, to grasp the reasons behind this sense of difference. Yet, before I could articulate another inquiry, he pivoted and strode past me, making his way to his room without a glance in my direction. A fleeting look once more. The stillness enveloping us was overwhelming, and the gentle sound of the door shutting behind him resonated like a definitive end to a dialogue that had scarcely taken flight. I lingered for a moment, anchored in place, engulfed by a peculiar blend of relief, confusion, and a disquieting awareness that something significant remained unspoken. I stood before the closed door of Owen's room, my heart weighed down by an overwhelming sense of loss. Words eluded me, as if an invisible shift had occurred between us, an unvoiced tension lingering in the atmosphere like a cloud poised to release its burden. My mind erupted with memories of how close we had been, recalling the subtle way his gaze lingered when Nick was present, and that undeniable tension simmering just beneath the surface, poised to break free. As I entered my room, I collapsed onto the edge of the bed, my mind swirling with the whirlwind of events that had just unfolded. I understood that I couldn't evade it indefinitely. Eventually, we would have to confront whatever was shifting in our relationship. Yet, I found myself at a loss, uncertain of how to commence untangling this intricate web of emotions. As I drifted deeper into my reverie, a gentle knock at my door broke the silence. My heart raced, a spark of unexpected hope igniting within me. Perhaps it was Owen, returning to engage in our familiar toe talk. I steadied my voice, though I felt anything but steady, as the door creaked open. There he stood in the doorway, his expression a mystery, impossible to decipher. I had become intimately acquainted with. He entered the room and settled beside me on the bed, his hands resting neatly in his lap, his eyes cast downwards. The silence lingered as Owen finally spoke, thick and heavy, as if the weight of all that remained unspoken was unbearable. The moment felt almost suffocating, yet somehow essential. At last, Owen shattered the stillness, his voice scarcely rising above a murmur. "Mom," he started, his voice hesitant, as though he were selecting each word with great care. I'm uncertain about the current situation. I apologize if my earlier actions created an awkward atmosphere. His words faltered, caught in his throat, and his frustration was palpable as he grappled with the emotions that eluded his grasp. I extended my hand and rested it on his offering, a silent gesture of comfort, a soft squeeze that conveyed, more profoundly than words ever could, "Owen, it's all right." I responded gently, my voice unwavering even amidst the swirling uncertainty. Inside me, we find ourselves, perhaps, both a bit adrift at this moment. It has been just the two of us for such an extended time, and occasionally, the complexities of our situation emerge. It is perfectly natural to experience confusion. He remained still, his eyes fixed on his hands, a distant expression clouding his features. In that gaze, there was a heaviness, a profound depth of emotion that tugged at my heart. At last, after what felt like an endless stretch of time, he raised his gaze to connect with mine. His gaze brimmed with uncertainty and confusion, emotions I could sense he was struggling to process. Uncertain of how to reply, I whispered his words, so soft that they nearly slipped past me unnoticed. It seemed he was caught in a struggle, hesitant to acknowledge, yet equally reluctant to face the tension that had been simmering between us. The fragility in his words struck me with an intensity one hadn't anticipated, and in that instant, I grasped the depth of its impact on him as well. The heaviness of my heart resonated deeply, mirroring the bewilderment reflected in his gaze. For a fleeting instant, I wanted to comfort him, like I used to when he was younger and troubled. I longed to enfold him in my embrace, to whisper that everything would be all right, reassure him that we could navigate through this together. However, I hesitated, uncertain whether that would genuinely assist or merely complicate matters further. His needs were shrouded in ambiguity, leaving me uncertain whether my instinct to offer solace was indeed the appropriate response. Thus, I chose to stay, permitting the profound silence that enveloped us to convey more than any words ever might. I lingered in that space, acutely aware of the heavy silence that enveloped us, poised for the perfect opportunity to shatter the quietude. At long last, after what seemed like an endless stretch of time, I inhaled deeply, finding my composure, and turned to confront him. I gazed into his eyes, seeking any hint of his emotions, any indication of what he might require from me. Owen, perhaps we should pause for a moment and truly reflect on all that I've expressed, gently searching for the perfect words, the ideal equilibrium between comfort and comprehension. It is perfectly natural to feel a sense of closeness, yet it is equally valid to seek solitude for the purpose of reflection and clarity. Reflections. We need not have every detail resolved at this very moment. He nodded slowly, as though the gravity of my words was settling within him, yet then, in a surprising gesture that took me by surprise, he rested his head gently against my shoulder. It was a gesture that instantly transported me to a time when he was younger, often finding solace in that well-known manner. It exuded warmth and comfort, yet there lingered an unmistakable sense of change in the air. A subtle tension lingered just beneath the surface, an unspoken acknowledgement that the dynamics between us had shifted in ways we had yet to comprehend. My heart softened at the touch, and without a second thought, I drew him near, enveloping him in an embrace that radiated both protection and comfort. It was a gesture that promised safety, even as the unspoken questions hung heavily in the air, unresolved and waiting for clarity. In that moment, amidst the weight of unexpressed feelings and the myriad of emotions we had yet to navigate, I came to understand that perhaps we didn't require all the answers just yet. We might navigate this journey gradually, unraveling it together, despite the ambiguity and complexity that lay before us. We lingered in the silence, wrapped in a quiet moment of emotional vulnerability. It seemed that the chaos and intricacies of our circumstances could vanish just by sharing the same space, yet I understood, beneath the surface, that reality was far more complicated. The solace of his presence was unmistakable, yet beneath that warmth lingered a subtle tension, an emotion neither of us could entirely dispel. Eventually, Owen withdrew, raising his head just enough to lock eyes with me. His serious expression had shifted the comfort of the moment, giving way to a palpable intensity. "I don't know how to process all of this," he murmured, his voice full of inner conflict. "I wish to avoid complicating our relationship, yet I find it impossible to overlook the matter at hand." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken tension, akin to a question he lacked the courage to articulate. The weight of his silence bore down on me, and I swallowed hard, my mind racing in frantic circles as I struggled to find the right words. I parted my lips to speak, yet before a word could escape, another knock echoed through the air. We both flinched at the sound, our eyes meeting in a moment of shared surprise and uncertainty. The knock resonated with purpose, a calculated insistence that hinted at an awareness of the tension lingering in the air. A surge of anxious energy coursed through me, prompting an instinctive response. I rose and approached the door, my hand reaching for the handle as I prepared to unveil whatever awaited me on the other side. Nick stood there once more, his expression shadowed by concern, as if he were grappling with a weighty thought in his mind. "At least," he said, his voice tinged with authentic worry. "Apologies for intruding, but I felt compelled to inquire if all was well. You appeared somewhat unsettled earlier, and I wanted to ensure your well-being." I hesitated briefly, casting a glance at Owen, who observed us intently, his expression a mystery, the air thick with unvoiced inquiries lingering between us. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice, though it trembled slightly as I answered, "Thanks, Nick, but we're fine, just having a quiet evening." Nick gave me a long, searching look, then turned his gaze to Owen. His eyes lingered on him, thoughtful and probing, before returning to me. He nodded slowly, though something in his demeanor suggested he wasn't fully convinced. "All's softening, right?" he said, his tone softening. "Just remember, I'm next door if you need anything. Don't hesitate." When he turned and left, I closed the door with a quiet click and leaned against it for a moment, gathering my thoughts. I turned back to Owen, who was still standing there, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. His eyes seemed to pierce through me, searching for something, for the truth perhaps, or for reassurance. After a long pause, he stood up, his movements slow and deliberate, and I felt my heart pick up its pace. Once again the air between us felt heavy, thick with all the things neither of us dared to say. He moved closer, and I braced myself for whatever words might come next, but when he reached me he stopped, his expression shifting, as though he were battling some internal struggle. Maybe we shouldn't push this, Mom," he said, his voice quiet, trembling just a little. "Maybe we need time to think." His words hit me like a wave, and I nodded, my own heart aching with the same conflicted emotions he must have been feeling. "I understand," I replied softly, my voice thick with the weight of everything unsaid. "We both need to think about everything. We can't rush this." Owen nodded in agreement, and we stood there in silence, our proximity a strange mixture of closeness and distance, as if we were on the brink of something we couldn't fully grasp or control. It felt like an ending, but also the beginning of something new, something we couldn't quite define yet. As he walked slowly toward his room, I remained rooted to the spot, wondering what the future would hold for us, and whether we could find a way forward, together or apart.